This is Mike Allstott, Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and you're listening to the Cannon Fire Podcast.
Tampa Bay Buccaneers fall on the road to the Baltimore Ravens 20-12. They move their record to 5-9 on the year. And, I mean, at this point, are we even surprised? The Bucs go into a tough game on the road. It's cold outside. It's rainy. It's wet. It was a nasty, sloppy game. And we couldn't come away with it. Something I'm used to saying here on the show. Something I'm sure you guys are used to hearing here on the show, but today we're going to talk about it one more time as we approach the final two-game stretch of the 2018 Buccaneers season. But welcome back to a brand new episode of the Cannon Fire Podcast. We are here today for episode 45. I am your host of the show, Rhett, the biased Buck fan. Joined alongside me, as always, my good buddy and co-host, Mr. Bucs Football, Evan. Now, Evan, you know, between you and me, if I got to be frank, I'm glad that game was over. I'm not pissed that we lost. I mean, of course you can be upset, but I feel like I'm a little bit more at peace with losing, especially in the fashion that we did. But good God, dude, what a boring game.
Yeah, I mean, it was. Yeah, I mean, you know, the conditions weren't great, which never makes for a fun football game, especially and with the way the Ravens play, 80 degrees and sunny.
Yeah.
You know, that's just their game, and it's not really the most exciting to watch, but hey, it works, and it was enough to beat this Buccaneers team on Sunday.
Yeah, and you know, something I wanted to comment on really quickly was the Ravens team. We knew they were going to go out there, play the way that they have these past few weeks. They were playing at home. But I'll admit that first half of football, I think even the announcers were confused. I mean, everybody was out of whack because this Bucs team was just as much in the football game as the Ravens by the time halftime rolled around. It wasn't the Ravens team that's used to just steamrolling people offensively. Now, obviously, that can be related back to the cold, wet, nasty weather. But this was a Bucs team who did have a fighting chance. And, I mean, you know, this was a game you and I both didn't feel like the Bucs would win. But for me, it almost felt like a carbon copy of last week's losing formula. I mean, the Buccaneers held an interesting game in the first half. It wasn't an offensive shootout, neither was last week. Second half, the defense is left on the field for way too long, and they get winded trying to stop Lamar Jackson. And, I mean, on top of all that, it was pretty clear that these guys were fighting the rain all day long. Footing wasn't too bad, but from the Brian Anger botch place kick to the multiple wide receiver drops, I mean, it was a pretty tough game, slow, dirty game to trudge through, but it felt a lot like last week when it came to the second half. Felt sloppy.
Yeah, and you know, the weird thing about that was a lot of people were asking me, well, why aren't they wearing gloves? Because you saw Mike Evans, Adam Humphries, Chris Godwin, none of those guys are wearing gloves. And actually, wearing gloves can sometimes be counterproductive because those gloves, while they are sticky in the rain, they don't work as well. So even in the snow, they don't work as well. You know, I own a couple pairs of receiving gloves, and I've tried to go out in the snow and play football, and they just don't work. Not as well as they normally would. So when it's slick outside, it defeats the purpose.
Yeah.
So that's why. The only confusing thing was, though, that not all the Ravens receivers, but some of them were wearing gloves, and they didn't seem to have a problem with it. I think there was one drop pass all day for the Ravens and a muff punt, but yeah, the Buccaneers, I mean, Chris Godwin on that first drive, Jameis puts the ball around the money, and apparently had Chris Godwin caught the football, a lot of people say he might have been in for a touchdown. Would have been like a 50-yard touchdown or whatever, because He would have maybe only had a safety to beat, and the safety was like at a bad angle, so he might have been able to beat him, and he was off. But yeah,
and it was
no catches. That's last week 10 targets, 1 catch. I mean, what is going on?
It almost seems like someone had brought this up in the group chat, but it has almost seemed like since we have seen less and less of Desean Jackson, and Chris Godwin has kind of had to step up in that number 2 wide receiver role, I feel like we haven't seen him in the capacity that we had before. And I mean, maybe it's just a rough stretch of games. I'm not saying he's bad. He's going to bounce back. He is a very, very good player. But something's been going on these last couple of weeks, and I don't know what it is with number 12, but what it's translating to is exactly what you said, just a lot of drop balls, and he looks lost sometimes. He doesn't look like the Chris Godwin that I knew. I mean, that drop we had just mentioned, I texted you as soon as that happened. I'm like, Chris Godwin catches that. Because when I watched that had to be probably the worst drop of his career that I have paid attention to. I mean, it was bad. And I get that it's rainy. I get that it's wet. And I'll be 100% honest with you.
He's a professional, though.
I probably wouldn't have caught that football.
Yeah, but you're not a professional.
That's true. That's true. And when you're Chris Godwin, when you're a professional, and you have showed the caliber of talent, to us before, he's got to make those catches. And
third-round pick. You know how hard it is to get in the NFL, let alone be a third-round pick? Like, I understand, but nobody's around you. You got to catch that. I understand it's difficult, but got it. Gloves or no gloves, got to catch that.
Yeah. And, I mean, offensively, talking about on the offensive side of the ball, there isn't a whole lot of good I can say about what this Bucs team put on the field on Sunday.
I mean, besides one play, right?
Yeah. Offensively, the Bucs struggled to find anything for another week in a row. I mean, Peyton Barber, he started the game running strong, but
and they stopped running him.
After so long, running the ball can't be the only way you move up and down the field. But for the Bucs, I feel like they just give up.
It.
That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying.
It. I don't understand. In the second half, they stopped doing it. They acted like they were down 30. You were down like 6.
Yeah.
The most you were down in the second half was the final score, 20-12. You were down 8. You've been having success running the ball. Run the ball.
Yeah. Speaking of which,
and every time you did in the second half, it worked.
Yeah. I mean, Peyton Barber has shown us this year that he's running better than he has his entire 3-year career. He's playing the best football of his NFL career. You got to put the ball in his hands more. I think he only had like 20 carries, which, comparatively to how many snaps you play and how many times you pass the ball, you got to run the ball more than 20 times, especially in that wet, nasty weather.
Yeah, I mean, one more thing I wanted to say before you made your point was, I know the Bucs were going up against the Ravens' almost number one defense at home in the rain. Not good, but I wasn't impressed with the play calling. And when CBS had broke a report before the game that said, some things, and it mentioned Todd Monken's name as being like out, when I reported that, a lot of fans were like, oh, why get rid of Monken or whatever? And I said, new head coach might want to bring his guys in. But at this point, has Monken impressed you the past 2 weeks? Absolutely not. And he's the one calling plays. I mean, yeah, I do believe that Dirk Cutter actually has some influence. I believe that the first 3 weeks were all Todd Monken. The first 3 weeks of the season were all Todd Monken. But then I think once Jameis came back, I think Dirk Cutter started to take over a little bit more. But, I mean, Todd Monken's still calling the majority of the plays. And it just was not good. I mean, that 4th and 4, I could have called what they were going to do on that one. I mean, and 3rd and 1. The 3rd and 1 where Peyton Barber got stuffed for a 3-yard loss before that. Why run the ball there? You run the ball good, work the play action, then you know how good Winston is off of play action. This coaching staff doesn't make sense.
Well, and one of the things that I wanted to say, too, about the play calling in particular is when I look at the play calling, what I don't want to say decide, but when I look at it and I'm trying to figure out if it's Dirk Cutter or Todd Monken calling plays, I feel like some Dirk Cutter shit is running the ball 3 times in a row and not getting a first down out of it. First down, hand off to Peyton Barber. Second down, you hand off to Peyton Barber. Third down, you hand off to Peyton Barber. Or First down, you hand off to Peyton Barber. Second down, it's play action pass. Third down, hand off to Peyton Barber. I feel like this play calling is getting more and more predictable week in and week out because as of these past few weeks, like you said, Todd Monken, I haven't been very impressed with what he's put on the field, but this offense just hasn't been on the field long enough to do anything. I mean, before you know it, it's third and long because of a penalty that brought us back, holding number 76, but this offense has just really fallen off, and it's weird. It almost seems like something we're used to now. The defense finally starts to play well, and then the offense can't get the job done. And this isn't the Bucs offense doing what they normally do. This is the Bucs offense, who is probably the best Buccaneers offense in team history between this year and last year.
But I mean, a lot of people have pointed out to me that this offense, the first 3 weeks of the season, and then for a few games there, this offense hasn't been the same. I mean,
really
not since. I mean, I would say
since OJ went down.
I would say even before that. I mean, when did OJ go down?
OJ went down, I want to say 3 or 4 weeks ago. I think 4 weeks ago sounds good.
It was during the Giants game. But even then, I mean, first half offense in those games were terrible. Honestly, if you want me honest, the last game that the Buccaneers played in the first half and dominated offensively was the Eagles game.
Well, think about it this way.
If you look at it, right? Cincinnati, they had to come back, right? New York, they had to come back. Carolina, they had to come back. I think after that Cincinnati game, the offense has significantly gotten worse.
Yeah, and I think the reason the Buccaneers were being called the number one pass offense for the longest time is because, like you said, in a lot of game situations, they had to bring themselves back. So when you're playing for your life, you're going to be productive. It's that's just how
you're gonna throw the ball down the field.
Think about it this way too. I mean, the Bucs run a vertical offense. We've talked about talked about that on the show before.
God, get that out of here.
Oh God. Okay, but listen. I mean, think about the injuries as well. It's pretty hard to stretch the field when you only have Mike Evans. Is he a great guy to do it? Yeah, because 9 times out of 10, if he's not open, he's the type of guy who can make himself open. But think about it. You're missing O.J. Howard. You're missing Desean Jackson, who at this point, I don't care if he plays another snap in Tampa or not. But
I'll get to that. After your point, I'll get to that.
Oh, for sure. But you're just not going to stretch the field with Cam Brate and Adam Humphries. They're fantastic players.
Same with Chris Godwin.
Step into their role and do what they have to do.
Chris Godwin didn't have that breakaway speed. I mean, Mike Evans doesn't either, but Mike Evans is big enough to where he can win a 50-50 ball. Yeah, I mean, Chris Godwin's 6'1", 6'2", and he isn't a speedster.
And I think that's what we saw. I think that's what we saw last week with Chris Godwin, is that he doesn't have that breakaway speed to really be the guy for those long ball plays, because we saw Jameis try to connect with him, I think, twice last week, and he overthrew him both times.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, it's really hard to stretch the field right now, and this is what that team did well when they were functioning on all cylinders. So, you take that away, what do you have? You have a run game that can't get going because your coach doesn't want to run the ball longer than the first half, and then you have an offensive line who doesn't allow too much time in the pocket for Jameis to make things happen. But let me say this before we jump onto Desean Jackson. I just wanted to comment on it. I do not think Jameis is off the hook for this game. I mean, he went 13 for 25, throwing only 156 yards, no touchdowns, and then he had the 1 interception.
4 drops.
4 drops. I mean, maybe a touchdown. If you take away the Chris Godwin drop, as we had talked about, he probably had room to shake and shimmy into the end zone.
Well,
but
the interception was bad.
The interception was bad. The interception was pretty much an underthrow to Mike Evans, and it was an ugly throw. It wasn't his worst. Trust me, it wasn't his worst.
No, just look at that Cincinnati game. That's all you need to
wasn't
say.
His worst,
if you want to see his worst.
I think if Jameis Winston plays these last 2 games like he did against Baltimore, I don't know how good his chances are coming back. I mean, yeah, he probably still has a good chance to come back, take a year, figure everything out. But I don't know. He's in a very, very weird situation right now because, I mean, if you know, you know. But if me, I don't know how thin of ice he is right now with the Bucs organization. I don't know.
I think he's locked in.
You think he's locked in for sure. So even if he goes out these next 2 games and throws 150 yards, 13 for 25, an interception, and 1 touchdown. Or even 2 interceptions and a touchdown.
Yeah,
over these.
I think the Glazers have basically made up their minds that they're going to win.
Right.
I mean, I think the Glazers have basically made the decision to fire Dirk Cutter, and I mean, I think I don't really have many sources on this, but I think that Jason Light's probably safe for another year, and unless this new coaching hire is absolutely abysmal, and let's say Jason Light gets another year, hires a coach, and he goes like 2-14 or something, then I could see Jason Light and the coach both go on, but I think Jason Light would survive the head coach's tenure.
Okay.
But, I think the Glazers want to see Jameis with a new coach and a new offensive system. I really do. So as long as Jason Light's here, I'm pretty confident Jameis Winston's going to be here. I don't think Jason Light's going to be gone, so I'm going to say Jameis Winston is back.
Okay. I mean, I feel pretty confident, just like you do as well. I'm pretty confident.
Don't get me wrong. I know that you're not the biggest fan of Desean Jackson. They miss him, though. I mean, just
no doubt.
even as a decoy.
Well,
because he's so fast that teams prepare for him.
Exactly. When you have a player on your offense that an entire defense is going to game plan around, yes, he's getting a little bit older. Yes, he's not the Desean Jackson who returned a punt against the Giants to pull off the miracle in the Meadowlands, but, I mean, he's still a player that you have to game plan around, and he's a weapon that the Bucs offense will not have. I mean, maybe they will, but
most likely not.
Desean Jackson is notorious for being a guy who can beat just about anybody off of the line, and like you said, teams are going to game plan around him. That's going to be tough not having him because,
I mean, just like the Giants game. If you remember the Adam Humphries touchdown, they put Desean Jackson out like sort of a fake little bubble screen, and all of the Giants were just looking at Desean Jackson. Adam Humphries beat the man-to-man coverage, and boom, touchdown. So, I mean, that's just what he gives you. I think he should come back for these 2 games. I don't know the severity of his thumb injury. I mean, it looks pretty nasty, honestly. Like, it's not like one of those fake ones. Like, it's an actual injury, folks.
Like, what did he do?
I'm not exactly sure what he did, but he had posted a picture of the thumb on his Instagram story, and it's
yeah,
it's all boogered up.
Well,
he had like a bandage on it and stuff. Yeah, it was pretty bad.
Well, let me say this. I want to go on record and say we've talked about Desean Jackson these past few weeks on the show. I've had some pretty strong things to say about him, but I think he has already played his last snap as a Tampa Bay Buccaneer.
I think he has too, but I think he should play these next 2 games. I think he has played his last snap, but I think he shouldn't. You know what I mean? He has, but he shouldn't.
I mean, if that thumb's looking gross, then I get it. But whether he's healthy or not, I don't think there's a chance that he steps back on the field for us. I think for him, it's a pride thing because I think he is very big on his pride for himself. We've already seen that before when he goes off on his little tangents on social media and things like that. So I think for him it's a pride thing, but I just don't believe we see him. And here's what this team has showed me. Against San Francisco, against Carolina, we've shown that we can win games without him. He's not a player that was heavily utilized in our offense at all, and I feel bad because he should have been. Even if not on the offense, he should have been involved more on special teams. I think his 2 years in Tampa, he only was on the field to return a punt like 3 or 4 times.
Can you imagine what he would have done if he was in like a Sean McVay or a Matt Nagy offensive system? I mean, that would have been ridiculous.
Can you imagine what he would have done if the punt return touchdown against Pittsburgh wasn't called back for a penalty?
Oh, boy. And that was a weak penalty too, by the way. I know that was in September.
That one hurts to bring up. Don't even talk about it.
Well, I mean, yeah, but I know it was in September. But yeah, that was a weak call. But anyways, yeah, I wouldn't expect Desean Jackson back next year. Bucs can save like $10 million by cutting him. So unless he takes a humongous pay cut, which knowing Desean Jackson, not likely to happen. I mean, if he'd go like, hey, I actually do like it here. Like I like Tampa. Like I may have been frustrated with the team this year, but if you want me to come back, I'll take like a pay cut. Then I'd consider bringing him back just for that reason. He's still a threat.
Yeah.
No matter which way you slice it, he's still good. He's not. It's not like he's not good.
I was actually
and maybe he thinks maybe if the Bucs hire a coach that he says, I like this guy, right? And the coach is like, yeah, I think I can work something for Desean Jackson. And then we got something going.
Yeah. Well, we just got to see. I mean,
time will tell.
I was talking to a buddy of mine the other day. He's a big Redskins fan. And I was like, listen, we sat down, we were just hanging out. And I'm like, I don't think Desean Jackson's going to play in Tampa next year. He's like... He said something along the lines of like, well, we don't really want him back, so you can have him. Like it was one of those things, and I don't know. I don't know 100% what that's supposed to mean from a Redskins perspective, but I think it just boils back down to what we talked about earlier. Desean Jackson is what he is. He's got his attitude he does what he does. I don't know. But I just wanted to say that I don't think he's going to be back in Tampa. Things could change. Time will tell. But as of right now, I am not too sure how much more we will see of him. So let's change topics here. Moving on from Sunday's game, moving on from Desean Jackson, we've got a little bit more Bucs news that, honestly, I don't want to say it shocked me when I saw it pop up, but it did surprise me that it was announced this early. I mean, it's fucking week 15. I don't know how early this is, but Bucs are preparing to move on from head coach Dirk Koetter, and they've started researching new head coach candidates. Now, from what I've heard, Dirk Koetter and offensive coordinator Todd Monken won't be out of a job for very long, as they've been quoted as being a top choice for many teams in need of an offensive coordinator. So, I mean, does that pretty much mean does that mean it's happening? Because I feel like the Buccaneers were researching head coach candidates last year as well.
Oh, they were. Yeah, they were. Like I said, they were close to firing Dirk Koetter last year. They really were. But it's tough to say because I mean you don't know for sure. You really don't, because so many things could change. If the Buccaneers blow out the Cowboys and the Falcons, and Jameis Winston throws 6 touchdowns and no picks in the one game and 5 touchdowns and no picks in the next game, I might have some trouble moving on from these guys. Just because these are two. I mean, the Falcons aren't that great, but
the Cowboys' defense has been one of the best in the NFL these past few weeks.
I mean, and maybe that would prove to the Glazers that Cutter's got this figured out, but I don't see it happening. I do think the Buccaneers are going to move on from Koetter. I think that report's accurate. I think they've actually been looking at head coaches before this. I would say probably after the Giants game, they probably started doing a little bit of research. But now I think that report came out after the Saints game. I think they're getting hot and heavy with it, with the coaching search. The thing about it, apparently, after the game at Baltimore, the loss, the Glazers were seen walking out of the locker room, sort of not with a happy look on their faces, and I mean that's never a good sign. So, I mean, yeah, anything can happen, but right now I'd say it's probably a 90% chance that Dirk Koetter and his staff is gone.
And at this point, I got to be honest with you here. I really do feel bad for Dirk Koetter. You're brought on for another year. This is a year where there's a ton of pressure. You're in the hot seat all year long.
Gotta win.
Gotta win.
And this is a talented roster.
And I think we've already seen the worst of Dirk Cutter this season. And I think the worst of Dirk Cutter is right around the time, I don't remember what game it was, but there was a game that he came out in his post-game presser, and he literally said, if I knew how to fix it, I would, but I don't know how to fix it. I think that was the lowest I have ever thought.
I don't know. Because the lowest I've ever thought Dirk Cutter is when he took over play calling and they scored 3 points.
I'm pretty sure that was the very next week, so who knows, man. I mean, we've seen the good side and the bad side of Dirk Cutter, but at the end of the day, I just can't help but feel bad. Like, I really can't. He's been around on this football team for a very long time.
4 years.
There's some players that like him.
Oh,
I mean, not say a
lot
very
of
long
players.
time. But there's a lot of players. Yeah.
That locker room loves him.
Exactly. And there's a segment on one of the local news stations. It's called Cutter's Corner, and it's where one of the news reporters basically sits down with Dirk Cutter, and they do this little 5-minute talk show, and it's all about just the game last week, what they're going to do to fix their issues, what they're doing at practice this week, and what's going to happen with the game plan on Sunday. It's a cute little innocent talk show. But just these past weeks, and I'm sure that if you're Cutter, you've already heard the news about the Bucs researching head coach candidates. When you were talking earlier, it was on behind me, and I turned around and watched it. There's no audio, but just the guy's face. He's drained. He doesn't look enthused. He looks mean. He looks grumpy. He looks sad, and I think that's what this team has done to him. And do I feel bad because he couldn't do his job? No, because you got to do your job. And I've sat here on this very same show, and I've just yelled and screamed about all the things that he did wrong this year. But I don't know, man. Seeing a coach go, especially one like Cutter, who I think has already stuck around through when I thought he was going to leave. Like Lovie Smith, when the Bucs fired Lovie Smith, I was surprised, but I wasn't bummed out, because it didn't seem like the Bucs tried to make Lovie Smith work. When they fired Greg Schiano, I was happy because he should have been fired. But when the Bucs fired Raheem Morris, I was upset, but I just wasn't bummed out by it. I feel like the reason I'm so bummed out by it is because the Bucs made a legitimate effort to just try and make Cutter work. And unfortunately, he didn't work.
Yeah, I mean, this team liked Lovie Smith. This team really didn't like Greg Schiano, but just you don't see the support that you see for Lovie Smith like you did for Dirk Cutter. I mean, this coaching staff is probably. I mean, Levante David actually had said, that in this year that no guys practice harder. This team practices harder. This team worked harder. And right now they're just not getting the results, and it's not a good look on the coaching staff, because the team's working harder, but on game day it doesn't seem to show up. I mean, that's the coach is trying. You got to get him prepared, and I mean it does suck because Cutter he's a good guy. He loves football. He wants to win more than anybody. But great offensive coordinator. Not fit to be a head coach. Happens all the time.
Yeah. Well, speaking of guys, great offensive coordinators not fit to be head coach. I mean,
you might have a good offensive coordinator fit to be a head coach. Never know.
A name I wanted to toss out there, a name we've talked out before, but Vikings offensive coordinator DeFlippo. I mean,
oh Jesus.
What do you think, man?
I'm out.
But let's be realistic here. Let's revisit the topic that we had before. Should I cue up the I cue up the Wheel of Fortune music or the Price is Right music?
Sure,
get
why
the
not?
segment music. So let me roll this up. But let's revisit this segment that we talked about before, because we haven't talked about it these past few weeks. We talked about it pretty much the week that we said Cutter needs to go.
And one of the top guys was John DeFilippo, who just got fired.
Yeah, this was 4 weeks ago. So let's revisit this. Let me get this music queued up here.
Oh boy.
Let's hope we don't get a let's hope we don't get an ad. We probably will. Excuse me. Here we
Bless
go.
you, sir.
No ads this time? No ads this time. Beautiful. Ladies and gentlemen, let me introduce you to our returning segment. It is the Cannon Fire Podcast. Official head coach decision wheel roulette. Who's going to be the Bucs head coach in 2018? Is pretty much what I'm trying to get here.
Dirk Cutter. 2018, right? Yeah. Aha, I gotcha. See?
So realistically, let's revisit this topic. We talked about it a few weeks ago.
I mean, technically, he's going to be the coach for the whole year of 2018. I mean,
That's a good one. Okay. All right. 2019. Sorry.
2019. Here we go.
Getting ahead of myself.
So, I mean, I can't say for certain one guy who's going to be the head coach because, I mean, I don't know, I know they're going to interview. Last time when there was a coaching change, I think they literally fired Lovie Smith just to keep Cutter. They interviewed 3 guys last time. One was Dirk Cutter. One was Buffalo Bills head coach Sean McDermott. And the other one was... I forget his first. It was Goodwin. Either his first name or last name was Goodwin, and it was to comply with the Rooney Rule. That's not, most of the time, if you're just doing that to comply with the Rooney Rule and you don't have a second interview with him, you're not really interested. You're just trying to follow the rules.
Right.
And yeah, 3. So that tells me they had their mind made up on Cutter long before. This time they're going to be much more open. I'm expecting. I'm expecting 4 to 5 interviews, and I think Chris Richard is going to be one of those guys. The Cowboys defensive backs coach, and I know a lot of people will say, "Oh my God, he's the defensive backs coach." Well, why do you want the defensive backs coach to become your head coach? Well, he also calls the defensive plays for the Cowboys. So, excuse me. Basically, he's like their defensive coordinator, and he was the Seahawks defensive coordinator up until last season. So. He's experienced. He's young, talented, defensive mind for a change. How about that, right?
Yeah, really.
Hear about the McVays, the Nagys, right? Defense. Another guy I could think might get consideration is Vic Fangio from the Chicago Bears and their defensive coordinator.
Yeah.
I think he could get consideration. I do think they'd be interested in John Harbaugh, but I don't think John Harbaugh is going to get fired. I mean, unless they still do decide, because that was the rumor that they're going to mutually part ways. They could still decide that, because that wouldn't be like a firing, but maybe Harbaugh feels that it's time to move on. And maybe the Ravens feel, Joe Flacco's out, usher in a new era with Lamar Jackson, possibly, right?
Well, here's another thing as well. Someone that I had pretty much told myself who I wanted to be the Bucs head coach, that's Bruce Arians. As time goes by,
Cleveland or bust.
we hear about it.
Cleveland or bust.
Cleveland or bust, but I just feel like that whole story feels less and less realistic. Like, he's not only coming to the Bucs, which is, chances are slim to none, but to go to Cleveland, to turn that program around, all that good stuff. It seems like it's something that's not going to happen, and I don't.
Yeah, he's not coming back.
Yeah, I don't want to hang myself up on it, so I'm just glad that you're kind of here guiding us through everything, because I want to know who you think, man.
But like I said, I do think John Harbaugh would get strong consideration and be probably at the top of the Glazers list. But I don't think he'll be available. Another name is Eric Bieniemy, right? That's like almost like finding Nemo, I live in an enemy, the Chiefs offensive coordinator. Now, I know Andy Reid does most of that stuff, but, if you look, every one of Andy Reid's guys has had success. Doug Peterson won a Super Bowl. He was the offensive coordinator. He didn't call plays, right? Ron Rivera, been to a Super Bowl. Matt Nagy, right, with the Bears right now. So, I mean, there's a lot of talented guys that come out of Andy Reid's system. And I think that being a Memi, I hope he doesn't become the coach just because I don't have to pronounce his name. He could be a guy who could really turn Jameis around. I mean, not necessarily turn him around, but steer him in the right direction, I guess you could say. Because right now, I mean, Jameis he's not a bad player, but, you know, he needs a big year. I think we can all agree on that.
Well,
go ahead.
Here's a guy I wanted to ask about. You know, we talked about him this time last year. He was someone who I really was hoping came to Tampa. Oh, God, no. God, let me go out and say this on public forum, too. This time last year, I was 100% Team Gruden, but good Lord was I wrong. And I will always admit when I was wrong, and let me just admit that I was wrong last year. But, no. A guy that I wanted to ask about, we talked about him around this time last year. And I don't know if you will rule him out because... You know, I don't know. He was in a weird situation with Indianapolis just a couple of months ago. But that's Josh McDaniels.
Very interesting. Not going to rule him out. He could be a guy that gets an interview with the Bucs.
I think if he goes anywhere, I think he's going to Green Bay.
I think Green Bay's a spot. I think Green Bay would likely be the spot. But I do think he could get an interview with the Bucs. Yeah, but I think right now, him with Aaron Rodgers, match made in heaven. But I do think he might get some interest from the Bucs. It wouldn't surprise me, so I'm not going to rule it out at all. I mean, would I bet money? No, probably not. But I mean, I wouldn't rule it out. You know, there's some other guys. You know, college coaches. There's Cliff Kingsbury, who had just got fired from Texas Tech, was just hired as the USC offensive coordinator. A lot of people say, you know, he's the next Sean McVay. He's the next up-and-coming thing. Texas Tech, he coached Baker Mayfield before he transferred to Oklahoma, and Patrick Mahomes. So his Patrick Mahomes' whole time there. So he has experience dealing with some young quarterbacks, and it's worked out. I think it'll be a real good thing for Jameis Winston. Excuse me. But, you know, that's pretty much it. I do think that the Buccaneers are going to keep their options open. They're going to look for guys who they think can change the culture, because that's the biggest thing, right?
Yeah.
How many times have you listened to an interview in the locker room, but you can't hear what they're saying because all you can hear is ping pong in the background? You know, and I'm not the one to say, oh my God, this and that. Oh, you can't go out. You can't go out on a date the night before a game, right? And as long as you're not out at 1 a.m. or whatever, I don't have a problem. If it's 8 o'clock at night, you know, and you're out on a date with your girlfriend, you know, live your life. But
yeah,
I mean, you know, and I'm not really one to say, you know, oh, in the locker room you can't have any fun if you're not winning. But I mean, it's kind of annoying. That's all.
Yeah.
And you know, good teams don't do that. You know, you'll never. Bill Belichick saw that. Oh God. You know, that would not fly under Coach Belichick. Another name I'm going to put out is New England defensive coordinator. Speaking of Bill Belichick, that's what reminded me of it. New England defensive coordinator Brian Flores. Now, he was one of my favorites last year. Got the promotion once. Matt Patricia left for the Detroit Lions. Got the promotion. And, I mean, New England's defense hasn't been that great, but it hasn't been awful, right? I mean, it's been okay. So I think that he should get some consideration. But like I said, there was only 3 interviews last time. I would expect 4 to 5. And then even though they're not interviewing, I would expect some reports of some interest of some sorts of coaches.
Okay. Now, I've got one more guy I want to toss into the mix. If you want to wrap up after that, that is A-okay.
Okay.
But here's a guy that I haven't really heard a lot of people talk about. And if you brought him up, I apologize. But Chris Richard, defensive backs coach, Dallas Cowboys.
Yeah, I did.
A former Seahawks defensive coordinator. So you brought him up.
Yeah, he was the first guy I talked about. Yeah.
Okay.
He's my pick. If I'm the Glazers, he's at the top of my list.
Okay.
I think he might be higher than John Harbaugh.
Well, if you already talked about Chris Richard, let me toss you one more name. And if you've already talked about it, then I'm just going to cut the music now and probably call it a show, because I guess that proves that I haven't been paying attention. But if you haven't talked about him, Pete Carmichael.
No, I have not talked about him.
Offensive coordinator for the New Orleans Saints. It's Sean Payton's offense, but Pete Carmichael, I mean, he's a valued assistant, and you got to give him credit for what the Saints have been able to put on the field.
Yeah.
And if you've just seen what this Dirk Cutter offense can do, imagine what this Pete Carmichael offense could do. I mean,
I feel like, we haven't really seen much from the Sean Payton coaching tree. It would be interesting to see. Pete Carmichael has been on the Saints for actually like 10 years or something.
Yeah.
But this is the first year, like, coaches put feelers out there sometimes, and when they're not interested in being a head coach, they won't really. But it seems like this is the first year that Carmichael has some interest in being a head coach. And I think, he'd be a candidate. I don't think he's going to get a job this year. I think that's more like next year. That he could potentially get a job, but it would be interesting to see what a Sean Payton disciple could do, because I feel like it'd be a little bit of a mix of the Drew Brees, Sean Payton offense, but also a little bit of new stuff mixed in.
Yeah.
Like I said, he's experienced, and he's been around one of the best coaches and the best quarterbacks ever. Definitely an interesting name. I don't think he's going to get an interview with the Bucs. If I had to choose the guys that are going to get interviews, Chris Richard,
Richard, not Richard, my bad.
I think it's Richard. I think. Chris Richard, Vic Fangio, maybe like Dan Campbell from tight ends coach from the Saints.
Yeah.
Now, a lot of people said, "Oh my God, tight ends coach."
Yeah, but I mean,
Dan Campbell was the interim head coach of the Dolphins, and the Dolphins actually had success.
That's what I'm saying. That Dolphins team that was 2015.
They were 0-3, I believe, and they fired Joe Philbin, and they ended up like 7-9 or so.
Exactly. He's a guy who's going to want another shot, and
he's a guy who's not going to take nothing. He's a disciplinarian, and I mean, with Greg Schiano, it didn't work because Greg Schiano came from the college ranks, and he never really was around pros, so he didn't know how to interact with them. Sort of like Chip Kelly,
Well, Dan Campbell, that almost brings me back to Pete Carmichael. It's really just people are gonna want in on what's going on in New Orleans right now, and
definitely.
That Sean Payton coaching tree, we haven't seen a whole lot of it, but
no. And I mean, Dan Campbell, like I said, he has experience with pros. He knows how to handle this stuff.
Yeah.
Like I said, though, if Harbaugh is fired / mutually part ways, I'm not talking about Jim Harbaugh at Michigan. I'm talking about John Harbaugh. I know a lot of people prefer Jim for some reason, because I guess he's like the sexier name. Because I don't know. I mean, I guess people. No, what's so?
I've never heard that before.
What, the sexier name?
Sexier name?
You've never heard that?
Jim and John? I mean, are either of those sexy?
Jim is.
Jim is sexy.
No, not, you know what I mean. Not like that. But like, oh my God, whatever.
It's all right, dude. You just think Jim Harbaugh's sexy. I get it. I get it. It's all good.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, definitely. Anyways, I would. Yeah, I want to see him be the coach of the Buccaneers for different reasons other than winning football games.
Oh, I'm sure you do.
Oh, yeah. Well, you want to turn this into a roast? Okay.
No. Oh, no.
Oh, yeah. I'll remember that. Don't worry.
All right. Well,
anyways, like I said, he went to a Super Bowl, lost it to his brother, John Harbaugh. Okay? Who's not as sexy, I guess. Yeah, the less sexy brother. Yeah, so I think John would be a better fit. Jim, it seems like he's rubbed people the wrong way over the years. And
seems like a very hard-headed kind of guy.
Yeah, he is. He demands a lot, and he gets under the player's skin, and some players like that. A lot of players don't. I think Jim would be the better fit. Like I said, if he is gone, I would expect him to be at the top of the Glazers list. Like I said, Chris Richard would probably still be at the top of my list. But for the Glazers list, I would probably say he's at the top. But yeah, if I had to guess right now, I don't know. If I were the Glazers, I'd hire Chris Richard. Wouldn't be a real hard decision.
I got you.
But I'm not the Glazers. I don't know what they're thinking. I don't know what they're looking for. We'll see.
We'll see. Time will tell.
And we're gonna find out. I mean, this in a month from now, you might find out, because season ends November November, December 30th. December 30th, so Dirk Cutter will likely be fired December 31st, Black Monday. So, I mean, hey, there you go. Well, if you really want Cutter fired, there's a little birthday gift. You know, the thing is that, you know, the Glazers will have time. They'll probably take, you know, probably 4 to 5 days of more gathering. That's why they're doing this now, though, so they don't have to you know, have it be February and a combine coming up, and you're about to hire a head coach. That's why you do this now,
right?
So you can have an extra 4 to 5 days after you fire the guy, and you can set up interviews. And those interviews, you know, after all your interviews are done, you normally take 2 to 3 days and come up with a decision. So I would expect a decision by mid-January, late January, something like that.
So very interesting time to be a Bucs fan right now. Very interesting time for this organization.
Mm-hmm.
As we've talked about
before.
Red,
you know,
yeah,
the holidays are coming up, right?
Yes, they are.
And we were planning something pretty special.
We were. And we're going to have to do some more on-air planning now that you've brought it up. But that is the Cannon Fire Podcast Holiday Spectacular live stream. I think you and I had last talked about doing it on December 21st, which is Friday.
That's the projected date, folks.
That is the projected date.
Don't come at us if it doesn't happen then. If it happens later or sooner, don't come at us.
Well,
it could happen later. It could happen sooner. We all know.
December 21st, I am working a bar crawl in downtown St. Petersburg.
Blame Rhett, guys. Blame Rhett.
Yep. You almost have to at this point. But I wanted to see if you were available that day or if you were available Saturday, because I want to say that I am free Saturday. So maybe we could get it done the 22nd of December.
Yeah, I think Saturday will work. So
okay.
Yeah, Saturday should work, guys. So breaking news.
You heard it here first.
Saturday, yeah. Well, you definitely heard it here first. December 22nd is the projected date. Yet again, projected. Big keyword there. You know, I'm sure all fans are probably thinking, "Oh man, he's really leading us on. Like, he's planning on canceling this thing last minute." But you know, the Holiday Spectacular. We're gonna be talking some Bucs. Not much, honestly. This is what this show is for. Maybe 10, 15 minutes. If there's some more rumors about coaches or players, you know, maybe. If I gather some more information about some head coaches I like, I might share it. Maybe we'll do a little preview of the Dallas game, which is on national TV, by the way.
Oh, yeah?
America's. I don't know if it's being labeled as America's Game of the Week. I don't know how it would be, but
it's a 1 o'clock game though. Still, right?
Yeah. Yep. It's a 1 o'clock game. Yep.
Man, we got to get a game flex this season.
Not gonna happen next season. You mean?
Well,
that's not gonna happen this year.
You don't think there's a chance Atlanta game at home gets flexed again? I feel like our last game of the year always flexed.
For what?
Oh, why did it get flexed against New Orleans last year?
Because the Saints and Panthers were fighting for a division. They wanted both of the teams playing at the same time. So Carolina was already scheduled to play at 4, so they moved the Saints from 1 to 4.
Oh.
That's why they did that. Atlanta and the Bucs are out. So yeah, that's not going to happen. But like I said, guys, favorite like Christmas movies and stuff like that.
Yeah,
just a lot of different stuff. Not the same old.
Maybe do a Q&A. You can come in. We can talk about whatever you want to talk about. Talk about music. Talk about Christmas. Talk about whatever, anything, but the Bucs and the product that they have been putting on the field. But let me say this to kind of wrap things up here. It's a very interesting time to be a Bucs fan, and it's a very interesting time for this Buccaneers organization. You've got a lot of moving parts. You've got a lot of very, very important things on the line these last 2 games. Dallas and Atlanta. Obviously, you want to win to close out the season. But there's a lot of things going on right now that we should prepare ourselves for. It's going to be a very interesting time.
These next 15 days, the Buccaneers could look a lot different. They could have a new head coach and GM. I mean, not right now, but I'm just saying they could have fired their new head coach,
exactly.
Their head coach and GM.
But bottom line, it's going to be interesting. So let's hang on and let's enjoy these last 2 weeks of Buccaneers football. But ladies and gentlemen, that's just about going to do it for this episode of the Cannon Fire Podcast. Thank you so much for listening, whether it's on YouTube, iTunes, Google Play, or iHeartRadio. You can follow the show on Instagram at Cannon Fire Podcast. You can also find us on Twitter at Cannon Fire Pod. You can follow my co-host Evan at Bucs Wave, formerly Bucs Football, on Instagram and Twitter. You can also follow my new Instagram account at BiasBuckFan on Instagram, where I go on and yell and scream and curse about the Bucs week in and week out. Check out our partners at PewterReport.com for some of the best Bucs coverage in the game, and make sure you check out our sponsors at CoolTowel.com. I am Rhett, signing off for Evan, and we'll see you next time. Go Bucs!